And I think I would like to take recognizance of our Deputy Secretary General and different members of the members of Central Committee and members of Parliament who are gathered here this afternoon. As usual, we are going to tackle a range of issues. You know that this week was a mouth week, where different statements was issued ranging from the IG, the president, and we'll also look at, in our usual style and tradition, we are also going to look at a review of some of the issues that we wanted to raise in Parliament that were aborted as not given space. So that we will venture into. At this point in time, allow me to ask the Deputy Secretary General to set the ball rolling.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to this week's briefing or presser. We're grateful that you could make it. And as alluded to, we've got a number of issues. The first issue that I would like to speak to, colleagues, is the fact that yesterday, the President of the Republic of Zambia held a presser which was mostly to deal with the issues at hand, the issues of drought, poor rainfall, and what are the implications. We will come that move because the President responded to many calls by all well-meaning Zambians that we were running out of time. It was about time that the Republican President or the government should take tangible steps to ensure that we start addressing some of the issues that we're about to be confronted with as a result of this drought, of this poor rainfall. And indeed, as we all know, the crop in Southern Province and Eastern Province, parts of Lusaka, Southern and Central Province, have all failed. And it is about time. Yes, we can talk about a lot of issues. We are going to have water challenges. We are going to have power challenges. But the biggest challenge that people are going to be faced with is food. So for us, when we speak on the floor of the House, to bring these issues to the fore, we mean well. We mean well because those are the issues that Zambians elected us to be in the office for. We do not mean to demean the government at all. All we are trying to say is that we mean well, colleagues. These are issues we must deal with collectively. And for us as parliamentarians, we have got a very solemn responsibility to ensure that our people's aspirations are met. Because when we are campaigning, all of us collectively and individually, we said we are doing this so that the lives of our people can be bettered. They can have better living standards. With the current drought, I think that would be a tall order. And that's why we needed the president to do what he did yesterday. But I was amazed as the president was speaking, because there are certain sectors which are going to be affected, seriously affected by this. The agricultural sector is one of them. The energy sector is another sector. The water sector is another sector. These three sectors, of course, livestock and fisheries also get affected tremendously by the effects of drought. Not that all the other sectors will never be affected. They will be affected, but these four are going to be in the front line. I was so shocked that as the president was speaking to these issues, one would have expected those four key ministers to be present. If they were in Parliament, well, Parliament business takes precedence. But then the timing for the press conference should have been rescheduled, so that these four ministers should have been with the president as the president was busy with that press conference. I am reliably told that the Minister of Energy has been busy campaigning. He's been busy campaigning in ward elections, not even in constituency elections, ward elections. He was trotting in Mwansabombwe. I was told that he was trotting in Impika and all the other. Very unnecessary, because this shows how our colleagues have got missed priorities. How can you be campaigning election and you are the Minister of Energy? and the country is about to experience some serious load shedding, and you are busy campaigning. So for me, I want to call upon the president. I said, well, President, please check the behavior of some of your ministers. Check the conduct of some of your ministers. They needed to flank you at that very important press conference you held yesterday. Colleagues, we've been talking about meal problems, maize shortage, and all the rest of it, and we are told by the Minister of Agriculture that we have got enough grain stocks in the country. I want to call upon Madam Speaker that when we complained, the President of the Republic complained about the erratic medical supplies, she formed a committee which went around the country to go just check if indeed our medical stocks were what people were saying against what the Minister of Health was saying. And they came with a report, and that report revealed quite a lot. I want to call upon the Speaker of the National Assembly, Madam Nelly Muti, to constitute a committee to go out there and verify how much maize stocks do we have. Do we have enough maize stocks for us to take us to the next harvest season and beyond? Because the harvest season will not bring much. The harvest season, we'll be lucky if we even get 1.5 or 2 million metric tons this current year. So it is imperative that we start planning, and we can only plan if we put the accurate and the correct information. So for me, I like to believe it's in the interest of Parliament that Madam Speaker constitute a committee to go and verify, because we cannot be talking about the same things every day. Those who have been following Parliament for the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about the same things. We talk about drought, we talk about this and the effects of it. So colleagues, for me, I want to call upon the Speaker. Please, as you did, you provided leadership when we were debating on medicines. Please follow suit, Madam Speaker, take up leadership once again, and constitute a committee of parliamentarians who must go and verify. We want to know. Zambians need to know. And it is our duty to provide the oversight roles over the performance and the conduct of the executive. It will not do for us to say we wish we had advised the executive correctly. Probably we have enough maize, so we shouldn't worry. But if we do not have, who is to blame? Is it to blame the Minister of Agriculture? Is it to blame PF? As you know, it is fashionable in this country. Anything that is negative, you blame on PF. Anything that is positive, people praise themselves for that. So for me, that's where we should start from, going into the future. Because we had information on the floor of the House that the UPND government will not stop selling maize. They will not stop exporting grain. They said that. Now we are told the main reason why they exported the grain was because they wanted to pay some Congolese some debts, which was owed to some farmers. Colleagues, I do not believe any one of us here, seated here, would rather sell the food stocks that you have in your home for the sake of paying debt. And then the following day, you start laboring to feed your family. I do not think anybody will think that was prudent planning. I do not think anybody will pat you on the back. I think people will start questioning you to say, what kind of planning, what kind of thinking is this? So this government went to town that they wanted to continue exporting. All the maize stocks that we left, huge maize stocks that we left, they said it wasn't prudent to be keeping so much maize. Even the Bible is clear. What happened in Egypt? What happened when Joseph was appointed to run the food stocks as the Prime Minister of Egypt? They kept food stocks for over 7 years because there are going to be bumper harvests in Egypt for the next 7 years, and there are going to be 7 years of drought and misery. So that is what we should do. So for me, I will not continue lamenting on that particular issue, because we are told there's enough food stocks, there's enough maize in this country. And also speaking to this, I think this is not fair. Yesterday, those of you who listened to the press conference, the president talked about northern province or northern region of this country in the negative. That we don't grow. We don't, it's an area where we don't know agriculture. For goodness sake, how were we brought up? How did we grow? Do people starve to death in the northern part of Zambia? No, that is a very unfair statement. And it should never come from the president. Why is it that when our colleagues in the UPND speak about the northern part of Zambia, they speak in the negative? What's wrong? What wrong have we done that every day they should speak about us in the negative? Those of us who come from the northern part of Zambia. It is not fair. The president should be the last person to use such terms and such kind of statements against a region, because I do not think it is a statement that can build this country. We are talking about building this country and taking everybody along. People of northern Zambia, they've been growing cassava for ages. People of northern Zambia were involved in the Chitemene system for ages. People in the northern part of Zambia grew millet and still grow millet. They've been doing this for ages. Colleagues, when President Kaunda encouraged maize farming in the southern part of the country, it was for good reasons. And the reasons were as follows. The northern part of Zambia had too much rain, heavy rainfall. As a result, because of the heavy rainfall, there was leaching, meaning that most nutrients got washed away or got drained, such that the crop was not as good as it should have been. So there are historical reasons why people in northern Zambia concentrated on growing traditional crops. Traditional crops such as maize, traditional maize, traditional cassava, traditional millet, and all the good things that we were brought up eating from northern Zambia. That doesn't mean that we don't know farming. Our forefathers know farming, knew farming. Our great-grandfather knew farming. Our mothers know farming. So it is not fair. It is very irresponsible to say the people of northern Zambia do not know farming. It's not fair. And that shouldn't be. It shouldn't be supported. And that should be condemned. Because, in fact, which parts of Zambia ask for more relief food? Is it the northern part of Zambia, or the southern part of Zambia, or the western part of Zambia, or the western part of Zambia, if you go back into history? So this is not right. We should not marginalize the people of northern Zambia. Is that the reason why we are even given fewer packs? Right now, we were telling this government earlier on December that increase the number of beneficiaries for FISIP in the northern part of Zambia. Can you please increase the FISIP packs and reduce from southern and the eastern and western province? Those who remember very well, when e-voucher was introduced, it was for the same reasons that we are grappling with today. When ECL's government, President Edgar Lungu, launched the e-voucher, it was for the same reasons. The reasons were very clear, that the rain pattern have shifted from southern province to the southern region of the country to the northern part of the country. And so it was easier to give e-voucher to our colleagues in the southern part of the country so that they can redeem and buy the necessary requirements for them to deal with the drought kind of situation in the southern province. But what did they come and say when they came into government? No, southern province or southern region was marginalized. We were marginalized. We were marginalized. Who marginalized them? Wasn't e-voucher meant for them? This is not fair. So we should be factual as we speak to these things, because there is a history, there are statements that we saw, there are a lot of good and bad statements that we saw. When President Hakainde Hichilema was campaigning, if you can remember very well, there are clips going around today. What did he say? He said the incompetence, lack of vision of the PF government, they are telling us that there's power deficit because of poor rainfall and because of the drought. They are failing to feed the Zambians because of poor rainfall or because of the drought. That's what they were telling us, and clips are there for all to see. It's not because of drought, it's just sheer incompetence. We shall do things differently when we come into government. So I want to see them, we want them to show us how they are going to do things differently under this pressuring drought. And it's not a good thing to have a drought, because the least people in our society are the ones who get affected more. So, colleagues, even other political parties, I want to call upon you. When you want to get power from your colleagues, do not lie. Do not be deceitful. Do not, at every twist and turn, you keep on painting your colleagues black. Because people are able to discern. Zambians are intelligent. They're able to tell who is a liar and who is not, who is deceitful and who is not. So time has come. In fact, yesterday, what I expected from the president was first and foremost to apologize to the Zambian people. Yes, to apologize. To say, sorry, countrymen and women, you remember what I said about PF? I said they were incompetent, and they are the ones who left the maize we sowed. So I'm sorry, Zambians. I said they should not blame the drought or the poor rainfall. Now the rainfall, the drought and poor rainfall is upon me. So I want to first and foremost apologize to the Zambian people and to PF. Thereafter, he should have said, I'll call upon the PF and all the well-meaning Zambians to join me in dealing with this particular issue. That was going to go down. And the Zambians were going to applaud him to say, here comes a statesman. Lo and behold, you cannot call somebody to come and work with you. In the middle of the night, you are busy insulting him. During the day, you are persecuting him. You say negative things about them. And then during the day, you say, come and work with me. Who does that? It doesn't work like that. So, colleagues, that's what I wanted to share about with this drought. A short one also, I wanted to say that in 2021, 2022, about 2,000 cases were reported at PSMD by government, and the number of people were suspended, over 2,000, because of their inclination to politics, or so on and so forth. And out of those, 165 were caught. Out of those 165, I think you, the media, need to dig deeper. Who are the 164? Where are they coming from? And what has happened to the balance? I think that's your responsibility to deal with that. We welcome the renaming of Kasama Road in memory of the late Namibian president. That is the most honorable thing to do. But we've got a number of new roads that have been built which do not have names. Why didn't we name one of the bigger roads rather than going to Kasama Road? There's so many new roads. There's that road which comes from Makeni, it's a bypass, it goes some places. There are lots of new roads that the PF built and constructed all over Lusaka. Why didn't we name some of these roads after this great son of Africa, the late Namibian president? What was so special about Kasama? What was so special about renaming Kasama? Anyway, we are also planning to name another road as Kasama Road. So we are looking at a number of options. So we've sent our people on the ground to go and tell us which roads we must name as Kasama Road to replace the one they've taken away from us, because we believe that Kasama, as a very important town in Zambia, also needs to have a presence in Lusaka by naming a road as Kasama. Maybe we should name that road which comes off Tokyo Way, off the Ring Road, and goes on to, there's a new road I'm told, which goes on to Leopard's Hill Road. Probably we can name that. And but there are also roads without meaning. There are names of some roads which have no meaning. You know, Leopard's Hill Road. What the meaning of that road? What does it signify? Why didn't they name that? Maybe we should name Leopard's Hill Road as Kasama Road. We are still consulting amongst ourselves, and then we shall make the necessary submissions so that Kasama Road does not die. So those are the few issues I wanted to share with you, colleagues, very few. And I'm grateful for your attention. and you need to continue probing us and covering us. We are very grateful.
Thank you very much, SG, and we would like to thank you for that statement. I think the SG has covered a lot of a range of issues, which among them include the statement that the President raised. And I think those of you who have the ability to search the social media, you remember that exactly at 9 hours, at 9:11 a.m., at 9th December 2020, the current president posted a very mocking statement on social media where he talked about climate is a crisis and it has to be mitigated. It should not be used as an excuse for incompetence. If you are lacking solutions, you should consult us. You are in the steady. There's no need for consultation. Implement. So I think balanda tukusushia lungu kwendamo. Sometimes you may think that the president doesn't need to ask PF now to appoint a task force. He needs to implement using the task force. And I think let us be sincere enough to look at these things the way they are. And I think he did talk about generally of the way we have managed agriculture. We also need to know that from 1993, Southern Province was attacked by that 1993 drought, and the river basins even dried up. And from that time, the pattern of rainfall there has been limping. And I think governments that have been there have tried their best to really try. And I think what he credited Southern Province to be a maize-producing area is the concentration of the UNIP era, where they declared it as a maize belt because of the manner of the manner of farming that they were doing, which was a simple machine that time where they were using plows and the like. This did not mean that other provinces were not farming areas, no. And actually what was meant is to promote a monocrop then. It was not meant to, Southern Province was not producing yamari and other things. For instance, who would say that, for instance, Southern Province accounts for 2-point-something million of the 4.6 million of cattle that we have. But Northern Province is the highest owner of rabbits. Can we start comparing to say, no, these don't keep rabbits, they don't keep this. It's about culture, approach in the issues. Having said that, let me invite Honorable Kampiongo to look at issues so that he can also do surgery to a lot of these issues that we are talking about. Yes. By the way, excuse me, the media, I need to also recognize that actually the lawlessness that is happening in Parliament, where Article 74 has been raped in daylight, we have seen how people can even be allowed to boast on the floor of Parliament that I am in control, where they just control their own jacket. And I think I also need to emphasize that whereas the PF, which is not subject to any faction, the PF that even Madam Speaker can take judicial notice, because Madam Speaker, I'm sure, can't recognize Utakula kwa 24 October and start calling that as a faction. Honorable Kampiongo is also our whip, just like the leader of the opposition is still Honorable Mundubile. And I think we are not committing any crime to stick to that. That is what the law states. But whip, Sovereign Board.
Thank you so much, Honorable Fobe. Good morning, colleagues from the media. Oh, it's afternoon. Sorry about that. You know, when we sit in the morning, we just forget. So Good morning, colleagues, and welcome to this media briefing. As usual, on Fridays, we want to commend this partnership that we have developed. I think my colleague has already alluded to the elephant in the room, which is the declaration of drought as a national disaster by government. And that government has called the stakeholders to come on board in working with them to mitigate the challenges that we as a nation are going to face. Now, you will recall that this is not the first drought we are experiencing as a country in the last 10 years. This could probably be the fourth or fifth, rather, drought that we're experiencing. What just may vary are the effects that were experienced. But you recall that the last one we had between 2016, in fact going between 2015 2016, which resulted in serious power deficit and food shortages in certain areas of the region. We in government then, through collaborated efforts and multi-sectoral approach, took a multi-sectoral approach to deal with these the challenges that faced us. Our colleagues in opposition then were calling for us to declare, and the president then, Dr. Edgar Chagwarungu, to declare a national disaster, not once, but on several occasions. But we knew that we were able to manage that the previous droughts and ensure that our people didn't suffer from hunger and other negative consequences as a result of that drought. So yes, we can be available to work with our colleagues. You know, when you are confronted with a situation like this, it's not, the best is not to take the easiest options, because declaring of a nation as a national disaster has got implications. Some of the implications my colleague will speak about, especially when it comes to the budget, which we approved for this fiscal year. What changes are going to be there? Because we can't avoid doing that in line with what has been pronounced. So, in as much as we say we accept the core, the clarion call to work together, we also want to express our displeasure in some of the pronouncements the president made. And one of them, I think my colleague Honorable Chang was spoken to. The northern region talks about regions like Wapula province, northern province, Muchinga, and part of central province. So when the president says these regions are not known for farming, we wonder what he was implying, because these are the regions that have been able to produce through our small scale. Ama farmers abalimi banono kunchendeshi kulwapula ku northern province na ku Muchinga province balalima ifyakulya ifyafurishako nefitungu fimbinga ku southern province bwino sana. Balalima beans, balalima chilemba, balalima mataba, balalima male, babika pona kalundwe. Eyo abantu bafurisha nama companies like breweries. So it's not fair. It's not fair at all, Mr. President, to categorize that region in a manner that was done yesterday. Because what the fear we are going to have is that when people start implementing mitigating measures, they may forget about this place and focus on other areas in terms of putting up measures like dams. So we took that message with serious concerns. We are national leaders, all of us, and we want to remain as such. But when pronouncements such as that are being made, and then we are the Minister of Agriculture also coming to National Assembly and pronounce reduction of farming input packs in these same areas that were mentioned by the President. It's a big concern. We had a report just last week which was talking about distribution of inputs without taking into account the aspects of agroecological regions, weather patterns. It's in the report. So, when we are being called to work together, it must be with sincerity and respect for everyone. Like I've said, we have managed droughts before. We have had power shortages, deficit in terms of energy. We had to import power to ensure that the economy was kept alive. The mining sector was kept alive. Some of the decisions were quite painful because we had to import the power at a much more higher rate in terms of tariffs than what we were supplying to the Zambian industry and the people. So we are waiting for the Minister of Finance to come to National Assembly to spell out what measures they are going to put in place. Now, in as much as we can't blame government for the current situation, we can't let certain people escape the blame. Here, you, our media, have been with us the whole lot of last year when we kept lamenting about the reckless nature in which Minister of Agriculture was dealing with our strategic reserves in terms of grain. In here, and we forewarned that strategic reserves that they were depleting were meant for a purpose. And it's situations such as this which now cause for the nation to fall back on the strategic reserves. You don't just wake up and start giving each other and start exporting. So these two ministers, Minister of Agriculture and Minister of Commerce, Trade and Industry, must be held accountable. Because the President yesterday was saying the other measure they are going to take is to source for more grain. From where? Where are we going to source grain in terms of maize, which is non-GMO? Where? So that reckless behavior of our colleagues who were acting with impunity, you remember them jumping up and down on the floor, that they were never ever going to cross the borders to stop exportation of mealie meal and maize. Here we are today. We want them to come and jump up and down and tell us how much they have now remaining in the strategic reserves, and if that will be enough to cushion our people. Already our people are choked. The prices of mealie meal are unbearable. Abantu balefula fokustafira kabunga nga wamma komboni omuntu apitire bula ushiku. Ukushitafe Pamela utuma sachets tuatu Pamela. Bwafya bweka. So we want Honorable Mutoro Pili to publicly apologize to the people for that reckless behavior. And we want to be assured that the maize which will be imported in this country will be non-GMO. Because even in the crisis, we must make sure that our people are not subjected to things that they cannot accept. So like I said, we who are representative of our farmers in the northern region, we take strong exception to the pronouncements which were made yesterday. And we call upon the president to find time to correct that impression which was created yesterday. Beans Chilemba. If there's a region of beans Chilemba from my institutions, northern province. So how can today that area be described to be people who are lazy? No culture of farming. Just simply means we are lazy. We can't till the land. In simpler terms. So, like I said, we would like Mtoro to come to us and share with us how much stocks of food he has made within the strategic reserves. It's very important. And also the Minister of Finance to come and spell out the measures that you put in place and how we are going to approach the aspect of realigning the budget, which my colleague will speak to. To our people, we shall remain vigilant, and when we are called to duty properly, we shall respond to the call, because our interest is the people of Zambia. And we have got a solemn duty to represent them and stand for them when the need arises. We have been at this before. We have been at this before. Even the former president is available, but we must make sure that as he is being invited, he is invited in dignity, because he's still got that wisdom which he used to navigate the nation. We have had COVID here, and what we want to hear is whether we shall have some supportive mechanisms to the farmers who are going to be affected. Remember, we had stimulus packages that were given to the people in order to restart their commercial activities when they were negatively affected by the COVID pandemic. So those are some of the measures we'd like to see. How are the farmers going to be assisted, especially those that borrowed money just recently to try and plow into farming? How are they going to be helped? Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I think what Whiplas talked about, it's like he was reading our manifesto. We have our manifesto, and I think we are not like headless chickens. We are guided by this manifesto. If you read our manifesto from page 14 to 30, you'll find that many of the issues that the president was trying to arrange so that he, at the end of the day, he may have some solutions. We have actually provided solutions in this manifesto. If you can just be humble enough to read this manifesto, you'll find that it's actually full of solutions. But I think having said that, we also need to appreciate that the 2015 drought, which was collided, which the presidency of Dr. Edgar Chaglalungu collided with, had a lot of challenges, and some of the challenges were overcome by the way certain solutions were put. I remember the government then docking a boat, is it a ship, near Mozambique to get some electricity, and that was getting a lot of $1 billion per month, so that we can have electricity as a people. That is what a responsible government does. And when we look at some of the issues that the whip has highlighted, I think it's important to understand that whereas certain methods of farming, of course, that's in a way where if you look at the Chitemene system in the books, it was more like condemned at some point. But those people who understand Chitemene system is that you cut off the branches, you leave the main back, and then somewhere, and those trees are left to spring out, and it did not cause deforestation. Whereas certain methods that were used in certain areas meant that the whole tree would be uprooted, so that maybe things may not. And in any case, when we talk about Kukosa and laziness, the people in the region that has been condemned use hoes, and they don't use any mechanized Even the Minister for Agriculture admitted that the 2021-2022 food security has been saved as and credited to this particular region. That the president was saying is lazy, and they need to improve the culture of farming. And I think let us put these things in the right context. I saw even the ministers, was saying, even combined, even where there is this problems, he talked about 2.2 million hectares. And out of that, 1 million is gone. That is not even true, because what is gone, according to the president, is 84% of the country, 72.4%. The president said the districts that are affected are 84, and 84 out of 116, these are 72%. So for anyone to underestimate that particular crisis, when what we have is actually less than 800 metric tons, and Mutolo says, even with those areas that are drought combined, the food which comes from that region, that was a very clear statement, cannot equate even the drought areas. I think that she should be withdrawn. And I think government should exercise humility. What if farmers said, okay, we are insulted in a way, and we restrain? Farmers, this is a liberalized economy. And we know that people are saying, literally, in Kaunda's Nambot, farmers will pay using maize. This time around, when they pay a 400, it has no security. We don't have a price control act. So they cannot force farmers to sell to FRA. And the government officials need to be very sensitive in the way they issue statements. Because the black market can take up the share of what? Of FRA, and will be in the dark. So let us be careful in the way we look at the smallholder farmers and make sure that we issue statements that are measured. Having said that, I think I would like to go upon Honorable Dr. Kafwai. I said Mutoto. I didn't say Mutoto.
Thank you, Honorable, for my brother from Chiluvi. Honorable Leader of Opposition, I've seen the SG has stepped out. The whip, senior MCC, our colleagues from the media. I want to appreciate the opportunity to make a comment. I think I only have one thing to say, and it is based on the pronouncement that was made by the President yesterday, declaring this drought we are experiencing as a national disaster. Many commentators have said that was the right thing to do. But before I make my comments, I want to remind you, my friends, that on 25th of September 2023, the President appointed Dr. Ron Mwamba as Auditor General. Today, 6 months later, Dr. Ron Mwamba is still acting. His appointment has not been ratified. It's a very unfortunate state of affairs. What is worse is that two deputies in that office, the Deputy Auditor Generals, are also acting. Now, it hasn't ended there. All directors under audit are acting. How do you keep a national audit in such a state? This is a very, very bad state of affairs for our national audit. Yesterday, there was a report on the floor of the House, which was there for the purposes of adoption, and it was talking about the 54th plenary session of the SADC PF, SADC Parliament. And in there, the theme was the role of Parliament in coordinating these issues of national disasters. And I drew some interest I wanted to make a contribution and I stood up. I was recognized. Now, when I made reference in my discourse to the fact that UPND government sowed maize, which they found in sheds, that didn't sit very well with the Minister of Agriculture. So he rose on a point of order. And in that point of order, he reviewed that they in fact sowed the maize in order to pay farmers. Now, I know for the fact that government does not operate outside of the Appropriation Act. When government acts out of the budget, the approved budget, they have to come back to the House to do a supplementary budget. Now, for this particular revelation that they sowed maize in order to pay farmers, government actually was just making it yesterday. I call upon investigative wings to investigate revenue which was generated from the sale of maize. Because I have been informed, and I hope it's not true, that there were companies which were registered like today, the following day you are given maize to go and sell. So how can government work with such operations? It's very unfortunate to learn this from the Minister of Agriculture. I could have called upon the Auditor General, but I have stopped dealing with the Auditor General until we have sense at the Auditor General. At the moment, we have too much senselessness there. You can see even the structure. Auditor General acting, 2 deputies acting, all directors under audit acting. So for me, I've said Auditor General, forget. In fact, I think it's just as well I'm not in any of those accountability committees because I could have been working out. Now, let me come to the issue that I want to comment about. Drought. The president does declare it as a national disaster. I agree with you for that declaration, Mr. President. When the minister was speaking, or the former minister for Wapla province was speaking here, our deputy SG, he said he was surprised that the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Energy, and the Minister of Water did not thank the president, because these are really in the forefront in terms of being affected by the drought. I just wanted to add that the Minister of Finance needed to be among these. And why I do add the Minister of Finance is because when there is a national disaster such as this, you expect that the budget is going to be realigned. You expect that the budget is going to change the form. And changing the form, the Minister of Finance is the one who would take the lead. It is my strong recommendation that that announcement should not end just like that. The UPND government must immediately identify areas that should be disadvantaged so as to take money to areas that will be affected. Let's be clear. If this drought brings about a lower generation of energy, lower generation of power, I expect that there may be load shedding. I expect that there may be less power going to the mines. If we get load shedding in our country, we expect low productivity. Even households are going to be affected in such a way that you can't keep your food for a long time. You can't run your barber shop throughout the day. You can't run your even those shops which depend on cold rooms, you can't run it throughout the day. So those are impacts that need to be mitigated. So you expect that government might be thinking about importing power. Now, El Nino has been talked about. No neighboring countries, or most neighboring countries have been affected. So this problem we are having here, we are likely going to have it in the neighboring countries. So where do you then hope to import power from? Maybe it's from the ocean. Maybe it's from a ship somewhere. So it then calls for government to identify a budget line from where money can be moved to the Ministry of Energy. Now, that's not a simple exercise. It is the same for agriculture, because food has to be provided for the Zambian people. Even though there is a drought and it has been declared a national disaster, this is not to say abantu tabakareri, abantu bafiirya okulya. So government must find food for these people. Therefore, government must find money to put into the Ministry of Agriculture so they can buy sufficient maize. And by maize, I don't mean GMOs. Proper maize for people to continue eating in Shima, as they have been doing all the time. Doing all this requires the amendment of the budget. And my question is, how is the Ministry of Finance going to amend the budget? Are they going to go through the amendment of the Appropriation Act, or will the ministry rely on a supplementary budget which is constrained by the percentage sometimes, because you can't supplement a budget by 50%. That is a totally different budget altogether. So what you need is for government to become clear what method they are going to use to amend this budget, so that it now becomes reflective of the situation where we are. Of course, recrafting a budget also entails identifying other revenue sources. I think that with this declaration, there could be some donors who may look upon our situation with, with a sense of sympathy, and they can bring in. So all that is modification of the budget. Macroeconomic objectives for the country need to be, looked at again. The borrowing plan, that borrowing plan where 83.2 billion should be borrowed from the local market. The Minister of Finance needs to look at that, so that it is now time to capacitate the private sector to thrive. And if we are going to do that, we must create an environment where finances are not crowded out by government. So all these objectives, the monetary objectives, they must be looked at. The Bank of Zambia should ensure that there is money money in financial institutions for private sector to borrow, so that their ventures, can be able to thrive. We are now headed, into a very, very difficult patch. But for the fiscal side of things, I want to recommend the following. This is where I immediately see potential savings. Presidential trips must be cut to a maximum of 10%, so that the savings from presidential trips can go towards mitigating the effects of this disaster which the president actually declared. Number two, the induced by-elections, where you see ministers going to campaign, even when they are supposed to be franking the president as he is making such important announcements, should be brought to a halt. Government must stop employing councillors as teachers, as policemen, in order to create unnecessary by-elections in wards. Government should stop the confusion they have brought in the opposition in order to create by-elections, so that they are able to change the constitution. All these unnecessary by-elections should be put to a halt. Let government concentrate on what is important, finding solutions. Number three, government must take decisive action on the over 400 civil servants who have been packed in holding position, getting money without working. Because as President Hakainde said when he was in the opposition on the 9th of January 2020 on his Facebook page, that a disaster must be mitigated. A disaster should not be an excuse for incompetence. And I do think that it is incompetent for the government to keep over 400 people at the cabinet office without doing work, but they are getting paid. Take decisive action. Let me recommend what action you must take. You need to fire all these new people you employed who are not working properly. That is why government is looked at so badly now. The incompetence in civil service is as a result of government packing competent people and bringing incompetent people. So fire all these new people and bring back these 400 in their positions. That's my recommendation to you. Finally, ZNS or whoever else must stop importing mealie meal from South Africa in order to export to Congo. It is irresponsible for government to be facilitating imports of mealie meal for export when in your own country you have a disaster. It's totally irresponsible. So I make these passionate recommendations to government, and I do hope that these recommendations will find it to the heart of government so that government can for once do the right thing, and this right thing which actually supports the Zambian people. I wish to submit.
Thank you so much. I think on a lighter note, I think Honorable Kafwa has a bond to chew with the office of the Auditor General, especially that I do remember that he is one of those that has raised an issue about the age. And I think from that time that that issue was raised, bringing to Parliament has delayed, and I think there is no appointment that has been made. As we all know, that the Constitution doesn't allow him to go beyond 60 years as it may be, and he has been caught in that way. And I think the one who is active, you know, when you act and produce a report, you are just as good as a substantive Auditor General. I think Honorable Kafwa has also reminded us that that way, we started to declare drought as a crisis or natural disaster. It's not enough. Abantu tabakatula ikepabwali because abena Zambia, whether you force them to go and eat kandolo, rice or anything, bali bele shokufunge minu mukutaka. And I think that's their type of food. That is cultural, and we need to be understood on this one. So, then he has also talked about the fiscal policy, as it may be, that you see, this disaster is looming in the face of a very toxic economic environment, where Bank of Zambia has increased monetary rates and the like, meaning that the informal sector, which drives much and feeds homes, which is falling under the small scale and medium scale, enterprise, has been killed technically before the disaster even comes. Now, with the coming of the disaster, there is the energy sources that are limited. You know that fuel has gone through the roof, and then electricity tariffs will go through the roof, definitely. And then, apart from electricity tariff going through the roof, there will be lack of electricity to run the primary and secondary industries, as it may be. So, I think as the leader of the opposition parliament would like to call him as a shadow minister for finance. He has lived up to that in looking at the surgery that he has done. At this point in time, allow me to call Councillor Sanga to attend to the issues that he has prepared, many of them to do with governance.
I'm so grateful, as usual, moderator. I'm so grateful for the opportunity given me again to speak to the nation through the press. We continue to appreciate the partnership we are enjoying with the press. The feedback we're receiving from the engagements we have is appreciated, and it's beginning almost to become unrivaled. I have very few remarks to make today. it's been indicated, I'm going to speak mainly to issues that have to do with the governance of the nation. But also because there's an issue that all my colleagues have tried to ponder on, I would also like, with the permission of the Leader of Opposition and other Central Committee members who are here, to start by reminding the President of the onerous responsibility that he showed us for this nation. I have always seized an opportunity when I see that the President is going out of realm to remind him of the responsibility that he showed us on behalf of the nation. And as a basis for giving the President this sound counsel, I always use the provisions of a constitution, because the constitution places upon the President an onerous responsibility of making sure that he carries the whole nation on his shoulders. And in so doing, it entrusts the President to act responsibly and to act with integrity when addressing himself to matters that have to do with not only governance, but also community living in the nation. Zambia is a diverse community. It brings together various tribal groupings and various regional groupings. And when you have the privilege of being elected to become the Republican president, you immediately clothe upon yourself the responsibility of being in every tribe in this nation. A president is not only going to be Bemba, he's going to be Ngoni, he's going to be Tonga, he's going to be Ruvale, he's going to be Luchazi, he's going to be Lozi. He has to embrace every other community. And you can only embrace communities if you act with integrity. You can only embrace community if you take upon yourself the responsibility of understanding how these communities live. There is a specific provision in the Constitution that entreats the President in Article 91, 3D, which entreats the President to respect the diversity of different communities that make up the Republic of Zambia. It is in the Constitution. Now, when the nation decides to put a clause in the Constitution, it's because they want to make a statement. As we were giving ourselves this Constitution, we were making a statement that any individual in this country who will enjoy the privilege of being elected to be in the office of a president is going to be citizen number one, and is going to carry with him every other tribe or every other regional grouping that comprises the population of this republic. I say this with passion because I have noticed that several times the President has made remarks that have resulted in reactions from the regions about whom he speaks. We haven't even finished dealing with the issue of the Barossaland, when he himself made a remark that there's no country known as Barossaland. In fact, it has caused confusion, not only in the country, but in my assessment, even the UPND itself. It is not uncommon now to be in this parliament and hear a member of parliament for UPND from Western Province making a statement that they come from Barossaland. They recognize the Barossaland, which the President has chosen himself not to recognize. And when the President does not make those measured calculations, he continues on the trajectory of making statements that are slightly inflammatory and sometimes that are very provocative. You know, like my colleagues have said, we have started receiving now, concerns from members of the public, those who come from regions other than where the President comes from, saying the President must temper his statements. It's very important that he begins to temper his statements because some of the statements he's making over and about other people are very inflammatory. Ulubemba lwaishiba obulimi bwabuko bulimi bwakweba ati ufuma kumbi tetushita understand if ababemba baikala bulimi bwabo ifo tuli manemputa ngepa tsana ba MP bakuluka shibakuva ku babuchirubi tuli manemputa bambi tuli mana mumeji twalikala more than 100 years mulimi wotwaishiba. If the President wanted to understand how Bembas and other people from that region live in agriculture, he should possibly have mounted a mission to Northern Province, rather than standing up on a podium and say we are going to teach them how or educate them on how to farm. That is quite insulting, Mr. President. It's actually very inflammatory. Ngamwali sendele fie, chance ya kuyatandala ku Northern Province, mukayasanga amabaka ku Northern Province, mukayasanga inkalakatimba ku Northern Province. Mukayasanga abaishibo kulima balumende bali manemputa huku bomfye nkasusheka sheka bali makasava bali manafimbi for twali makusazu ku Northern Province, including millet, which feeds into the nation food basket. For me, I think that the President, like many people have started saying, should begin to temper his language. And you could see that even him is beginning to recognize that some of the statements that he's making on the podium that he takes are quite inflammatory to the people about whom he speaks. Yesterday, he had to caution himself. After making a statement, he even says, I hope nobody's going to go out there to go and misquote me. I mean, the president is now even being concerned about being quoted correctly. That is not how you are going to discharge the functions of the president, or Mr. President. We have sworn an oath to you, and that oath reminds us to correct you when you make statements that are capable of being misunderstood and creating discontentment in the nation. Already the nation is still grappling with the issue of Barossa. You don't want to create another pocket of misunderstanding in the northern region because of the statements that you make when you have an opportunity. Please temper your statement, Mr. President. You know, briefly regarding what he was saying about the fact that they're going to make dams, I think, in the southern region and other regions that have been affected by the drought. Like my colleagues have said, it's a welcome idea. But I think if this was subjected to dialogue, the president was going to hear other views from other people. You know, what value are the dams going to bring to the nation if they can't be done, for instance, at the same time as maybe mechanizing the northern part of the nation? You've got so much rain in the northern parts. Do you want us to continue with peasant agriculture when an opportunity presents itself for you to mechanize? Why can't you invest as a government into mechanization by, for instance, bringing in equipment like combine harvesters and center pivots, you know, and put them in those regions where you've got enough rain? Or utilize other mechanized agriculture, you know, implements to ensure that we maximize on the production rather than putting dams in an area where there still is going to be drought. Because even those dams have to be filled somewhere using water that not only is going to come from rain, but sometimes you have to tap water from the rivers in the northern region where you've got massive water pockets, and then transfer those waters to the southern region so that you can now uniformly, you know, supply or have a supply of uniform water in the whole nation. I'm thinking the president must not shy away from engaging with people that are competent in these areas to ensure that he gets sound advice on how he can deal with this issue of the effects of the droughts in the nation. You know, I also just want to speak briefly about the Inspector General's remark on the former president, the 16th Republican president's right to immunity. You know, oftentimes when the IG finds an opportunity to speak about the 16th Republican president, he exhibits dangerous levels of excitability when talking about Dr. Lungu. One wonders what motivates this IG to make these remarks. The IG, I have said before, is not an ordinary police officer. He stands at the apex of law enforcement in this nation. He should be the last to make remarks that have the potential of raising a particular portion of the society against the government. This IG is supposed to be a public officer whose responsibility is to ensure that the police discharge properly the function of maintaining law and order. He should be the last person to speak in the manner that he speaks, especially when he has to speak about the 60th Republican president. It is not misplaced to demand that for what Dr. Edgar Lungu did to this nation in the last 7 years, he is owed respect, especially by institutions that he himself was able to assist in reforming to become what the police service is today. He may not be in office, yes, but at least he should be owed some amount of respect. I will not be surprised now, after hearing what this IG has said about the president, if you hear a sergeant deciding he's going to arrest the 60th Republican president, and people are going to get a rude shock when these things begin to happen. Because if a leader of an institution such as the police makes a statement like the one Mr. Msamba has made, it instigates or it excites the junior officers to go over boss Nabalanda to allow you hear a call out being sent to the president, you know, and you hear somebody getting excited and deciding he's going to arrest the president. I say this because the president continues to enjoy immunity even beyond his tenure. Okay, he was on mission, and the mission ended with the election of 2021. But the Constitution provides that he shall continue to enjoy immunity in accordance with provisions of Article 98.4 up to Article 98.8 of the Constitution. The President, in the name of the 60th Republican President, continues to enjoy immunity. And the Constitution has got stringent provisions of how you can go about removing the immunity of the President. In fact, the responsibility of instigating the removal of immunity from the assistant Republican president rests with the current president. And it is for this reason that some of the critics in the nation have been calling on the current Republican president to begin to create a basis of a relationship between him and the 60th Republican president. Some people may have forgotten. The reason why we ended up with where we are with the 2016 constitution is because of the embarrassment this nation caused itself in the past in dealing with matters relating to President Frederick Chiluba and President Arabi Banda, where somebody who has served your institution, or your nation rather, at the highest office becomes the subject of that kind of embarrassment, not only nationally, but also internationally. Stakeholders were agreed that when somebody leaves office, they must be given in a position where they must be placed in a position where they continue to enjoy that respect, unless in extreme and extraordinary circumstances. The fact that Dr. Lungu has decided to take measures to protect the status of the Patriotic Front does not make him lose immunity. It does not even make any police officer to begin to think excitably that they can instigate a process of removing the immunity from the assistant Republican president. I think Mr. Musamba must realize one thing. He is not an ordinary police officer. He is the Inspector General of Police. He is served by police commissioners. He is served by senior police officers, some of whom have got legal qualifications. If he has any doubt about how to handle the office of a former president, he should be able to summon his commissioners, some of whom have legal qualifications, some of whom are lawyers. And I'm very convinced that even as I'm speaking to you now, some of the lawyers in the police service have given this man an opinion on what the provision of Article 98 of the Constitution actually says. It's only that he has chosen to ignore it for political expediency. He has chosen to ignore it because he thinks he's supposed to be doing the bidding for the Republican president. That is very wrong. I have always suggested to the IGs, they should try and emulate what Mr. Ephraim Mateo used to do when Mr. Manawasa was president. Mr. Manawasa knew the law. Of course, it was an advantage. But when he was dealing with his office of president, he used to say, I am not the lawyer, and I'm not the police officer, but I expect my IG to conduct his affairs with objectivity and professionalism. And that's why you noticed in the days of Manawasa, there was no cases of cadarism. It is because the president discharged his function under the Constitution properly and guided his IG properly. But also, it is because the IG then, Mr. Ephraim Mateo, believed in a professional responsibility that he carried as he discharged the functions, of being the IG and the topmost police officer. So I can only make a call to Mr. Musamba, the current IG, to please seek legal counsel within the file and ranks of the police before he gets the public to speak about whether Dr. Lungu enjoys immunity or he doesn't enjoy immunity. The third point I wanted to make very briefly is this controversy that we have found ourselves in as a nation. The public is aware that our Solicitor General, as opposed to the Attorney General, a couple of days ago appeared before the International Court of Justice to go and pen an opinion about what Zambia's position is regarding the war between Israel and Palestine. This topic is a very emotional topic for the last 40 years plus. And as nations, we have molded an opinion on how we are going to treat the war between, or the relationship rather, between Israel and Palestine. Our foreign policy for all the successive governments has been very consistent. We have taken the policy of non-alignment, not only in that area, but elsewhere where there has been wars and rumors of war. I was very surprised myself because on the floor of the House, Honorable Binu Mpundu raised this matter and asked the Vice President whether she was aware that Zambia had volunteered to go and give an opinion to the International Court of Justice relating to the Israel-Palestine war. The Vice President was almost swearing that she was not aware of this position and that Zambia was not going to show up at the ICJ to go and offer an opinion about this war. All of us were taken by surprise because we had seen dispatches on social media, we had seen dispatches on platforms of international institutions, including the ICJ itself, suggesting that the Zambian delegation was going to come. Of course, I had expected that the Attorney General, being the leader of government, being the chief legal advisor to the government, was the one who was going to appear. Lo and behold, we saw the Solicitor General with a handful of lawyers from Ministry of Justice. He's the one who went and appeared and who went and gave an opinion that, quite frankly, does not represent the consistent foreign policy that Zambia has. And this has brought concern to all of us. Mr. Beno Mpundu wanted to pursue that matter again yesterday. He raised on the floor of the House. Of course, as we expected, because we're in the opposition, he was carpeted, and that matter was not discussed in the important in the important assembly of the nation. Now, this has thrown us into a state of trepidation as a nation. Why do I say so? Because, like I said earlier, we have a consistent public policy position regarding the Israel-Palestine relationship. And that is informed by the engagement that Zambia has had, not only as a government by itself, but also in partnership and relationship with other institutions to which Zambia is part. Zambia is part of the Southern African Development Coordination Conference, SADC. Zambia is part of the East and Southern African COMESA and the AU. What we heard Mr. Mchende advise the ICJ may not necessarily reflect the foreign policy position that has been taken by the SADC and COMESA and even the AU. And for me, it was surprising that it would appear we're the only nation from here that found it prudent to go and appear before the ICJ and go and make a position that is not even consistent. Everybody who heard what Solicitor General Mr. Mchende was speaking about, it never spoke about, whether we support Palestine or whether we support, Israel. It was a hollow statement that was basically an in-between statement, leaving the ICJ confounded about what the position of Zambia is. But if you followed the foreign policy of the UPND, they are consistent. When the Ukraine and Russian war broke out, there was confusion about what our position is. I think I remember when the Minister of Foreign Affairs came to the floor of the House and was not able to tell us with determination where we belong in terms of which side of that war did we support, which side did we support. In fact, there was a story that the president seemed to have suggested that we were going to go with the American position, i.e. supporting Ukraine. In the subsequent months that came, the president found himself in a convoy of presidents who had gone to speak to, I think, the Russian president about that position. Now, that for me is a clear case of policy inconsistency insofar as the foreign policy is concerned. We need to be able to become serious as a nation and show maturity and state a position that we have. We have had president before. President Kaunda even chaired the non-aligned movement. There is literature all over about what Zambia's position has been in international relationships over a long period of time. President Frederick Chiluba, I'm sure he had come and read for himself what the position was when UNIP was in power, and we remained consistent with our position in terms of international relations. So was the case even under President Mwanawasa, under President Rupia Banda, under President Michael Sata, and even under President Edgar Chagwarungu. You never had these policy inconsistencies, which draws us into a position of conflict, even with institutions that we relate to, such as SADC and COMESA and even the AU. So for me, I would like the UPND government, they call themselves the New Deal government, to come out in the open and make a statement. What is our foreign policy position regarding the international geopolitical relationship? Who have we consulted amongst our citizens to take that foreign policy position? But most importantly, how does that foreign policy position of Zambia sit in relation with our relationship with SADC, with our relationship with COMESA, with our relationship with the AU? We can't be cowed like a small rabbit that is being pulled all over the place by these bigger powers. America has its own position on Israel, and they've remained consistent for the longest time possible. Russia has got its own position on Israel, and they've remained consistent for the longest time possible. These other countries that haven't gone to present their position at the ICJ are not foolish. It's because they know how delicate international relationships are supposed to be and how you're supposed to manage them. We can't pretend to be smarter than those who came before us. And I think that for me, that's a downfall of the UPND government. The UPND seems to want to think that they're more smarter than the PF was, that they're more smarter than the MMD was, and they're more smarter than UNIP was. But if you're going to look at the history of where we've come from as a nation, it is in being careful and having a properly crafted foreign policy position that Zambia has regained respect, not only as a nation, not only in the region, not only on the African continent, but world over. Because Dr. Kaunda was respected to an extent where even when America wanted to go to Iraq, to war with Iraq, he was a single head of state who was asked by the Americans to go and negotiate, with Saddam Hussein. Why? Because we had crafted a powerful foreign policy position that it gains us respect. Right now, I think we still continue to chair the security striker of SADC, if I'm not mistaken. We need to be more careful. This is a position of responsibility that we can't toil with by suggesting that we can go out there and go and state a position that doesn't even reflect. The vice president does not even know that position in your own country, and you are chairing the security striker, of the SADC. What kind of, character are we exhibiting before the international community? These are very important matters. And the misfortune we have is, even as we are speaking to you, I know some people from UPND, pen pushers who are being sponsored, are insulting us right now on Facebook, to the extent that people are not even going to pay attention to this important topic that we're talking about. That can create chaos in the region. So I want to end the leader of opposition by calling upon the UPND. Please come out in the open for the first time. Come and state for this nation what your foreign policy position is regarding the geopolitical relationship in the international community. The world is changing very fast. We need to stand up as men and women who are going to continue retaining the respect that we've had in the international community historically and current and even going to the future. But if you're going to be so flippant with your foreign policy, this moment we don't know where you are, this moment you are in between, this moment you're on the left, we are going to continue losing respect. Even the same Americans to which you keep running to, they are going to write you off because they know that you don't support them out of principle. You support them out of convenience. And this must come to an end right now. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just like the qualities that I've presented, I think we present alternative policy in what we say and what we do. We don't just rant. At water for the country is not evenly distributed. Meaning the concept of damage, even when we boast to say 40% of SADC water, quite left to move more, uko amenshi yako selela. Te kutrati amenshi yako manafi mpanga yo nsenga futu mwene kuli drought kumbita kuli drought. So waloya watirala that surface water na ground water tayaba evenly distributed. So for a solution yakuta tuingamona ko buno bwino ofo tuinga sta distribute amenshi. There is need to put our heads together so that at the end of the day, we can create a national water network that can make can ensure that all the places have the water for cooking, for food, for drinking and agriculture activities. Bala balanda nokulanda tawe. Bamusaba bapula mongo muno wapakati. Filatranda mchibe mbati mpende atrokogwa. Alo walanda bati kuli mi mwene ya kumonekera so nifira balanda tumumembe mini nasongesha nabale ndetse tukira bonsana tumona tubamusaba n'abakiramo fesi bamusaba pano twikere bali pressure maladi kalape ne bamusaba bali benda na Bureau of Rights yes mwitumba konsako bateranji bali na Bureau of Rights ya mwitumba ifo pano tuli bashaba bamusaba pale bali in short bamusaba naba bapona more powerful than the president mukwipishia bantu practice ya bamusaba na iya sana yandere fikwati ni cancer she balora baterana ndapana bamusaba ngabache besu balanda ati kuti wa chefya ati chefyeni chemeni bamusaba she balora balanda nikabundi chefya mtu mpaka shaba nabeni bamusabe nchito tashibelelela yo bali opposition muri bali abantu bali ya basaisa beka muno mu Zambia but mulandura kuti ati bamubali ichindike taba bako nkefi fionse yo nomba bamusaba nation na bamya baloyati mu 1991 bakaunda basaikara na pache ichi yabatirati cathedral of the Holy Cross bachinja article 4 nokulanda that we are reverting back to Mount Party so bachita revert to Mount Party abena Zambia bali beresha culture ya Mount Party bamusaba 3 miliyoni mbefu muletere muno tefi aba mu constitution Now, and one of the things in the constitution is that the police should respect human rights. Number human rights. Ukufuma pali article 11 kushinta 28 mwabika mtumba lo mwala ndarafi fotere ko nkamutire mpapa tabamsaba muleti pera lisa assembly yo bamusaba muleti pera lisa ntweni imope abopeni muri bamusaba and next time you mufira balo yabatiranda kona kanana line movement kalaka ko batifwe epo twa pole saka shimpire epo twa pukele independence twali kwataba nensoba kusana and we have people all over the place if you are if you say epo le saka pashina nelo twale affiliate kuli Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the like twale konka tatwale sala kwati yumu nensu twale konka tilechipe mbatu usungomo nango teshibikwa nomba echo tsangire mutakwe bati police tuletera fe America ngala nde chini shoko twalako kulubalwa wa America ni shoko tuli efo chile moneka fye nokumoneka balo abati tulonda kuno kulonda twali kalumba fye mu parliament ina kalumba menshishi mulanduna ili ashidia kuya kwaisi kwa twali no kwene fye mwalanda po filafya extreme lumendo bali na Jesus Peter bamupushe mkwitatu kucho nto chamulilo ushayi wa mwali na Yesu atawe nchimwishi nakali bamupushe na Yesu atawe nchimwishi wa kutatu Yesu asamulolesha no kumulolesha bashi mparliament Peter ne filamba fyali ponele ndika pali dia so twikwata shimisango cha chitireko Peter pali dia nshita nango Yesu ndidashi kwikasa mwe batipali wenga shimpa kweliwe chomko pali no nshita echo bale kitani fasazi balo yawerera ndati kwateko akatina pali no nshita tusherefe na omofye president former president surviving president uli 60th president lero temu angacha kwati chidoli tatumu peri omuchinji pano terera ndaba nensuku Tanzania bali kwatako ali asani mwini bafuile ero bafuile nabo bachindika kaidi bakwati bafuile mu muchinji nomba kuna watu wakwata fi watu pela lesa nyumo na wale ngiro kutata asante pala nilesa nomba musango sangirwe mu wakwe bati asangwike punching back yansele ufungu chindi komwe ndetetekela hapo ninga stamalizera ilinde techpolo chesu mkwai leader of the opposition in parliament inkala katimba mkwai ukukonka nefyo ya urupapolo lwa constitution walanda munya after ntama article 4 noti balaba ko batasa imafya ambo kuyina na tiyo nteke jacket yanti pantu ngamwa mengana pala no mbaba me bali pala echo mkwai ndeta ko chitwe mambo batu popolo ko jashi.
Thank you, Honorable Foe, who today is our Director of Ceremonies. I'll start by thanking Honorable Kabasoka Mpampi, who's been our MP on duty for this week, for putting together this media interaction. I also wish to further acknowledge the presence of our Chief Whip, the PF Chief Whip, Honorable Stephen Kampiongo, who at the same time is a member of Central Committee. I would like to acknowledge the presence of a member of Central Committee and Chairperson for Legal, who at the same time doubles as a Shadow Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs in our Parliament, Honorable George Chisanga. May I acknowledge the presence of a member of Central Committee, Honorable Mutotwe Kafuaya, who's our Shadow Minister of Finance and National Planning. May I acknowledge Honorable for himself as Chairperson and Shadow Minister of Sport. I acknowledge the presence of Honorable Kapianga Robert, Member of Parliament from Pika, and also the Youth Chairman for Muchinga Province. May I lastly acknowledge, appreciate the media that have been with us the past 2 years. Like I said last time, I think this partnership is paying dividends. Countrymen and women, you know that we are operating under very difficult circumstances. If you've been following parliamentary business, you will agree with me that your elected members cannot debate freely in Parliament. There is diminished parliamentary democracy in the House, to the extent that one of our members yesterday, Binwampundu, was told not to laugh in the House. And, something that is very unfortunate. My 9-year-old daughter was asking me last night how I was going to survive in the House. She knows me as a very jovial man who from time to time shares a light moment with colleagues. That with the new rules where you cannot laugh in Parliament, Dad, how are you going to survive? Honorable Whipper could not respond. I was embarrassed. I could not respond. Yeah. So this platform is very, very important because this is the platform where we respond to certain matters that could not have been presented on the floor of the House. We also bring to the fore matters that we intended to bring on the floor of the House, and because of the rigidity and the misapplication of standing orders and indeed the Constitution, whenever members don't get that opportunity, we find this chance to inform the nation so that everybody is kept informed. So I wish to commend you once again, the media, for being consistent and being our partner the past 24 months that we've been able to present this program consistently and without break. In Bemba, we say, there's been discussions regarding the declaration of this drought as a disaster by His Excellency the President. I join all those that spoke before me in supporting this particular move. However, I want to say that this particular disaster actually should have been declared in 2022-2023. Had the President known had the President known then what he knows now, he should have actually declared that disaster in 2022. This disaster actually happened the moment the government decided to start exporting 1.5 million tons of maize. That's when this disaster should have been declared. This disaster should have been declared the moment the Minister of Agriculture decided to reduce the quantum of support in terms of inputs to farmers in the northern part of the country and increase that quantum of support to the southern part. Believing that the government, the previous government, had marginalized the southern part. At that point, we knew there was a disaster. Countrymen and women, if you had closely followed our debates on the floor of the House, we were very consistent and firm on this. Because we said, if you are going to export 1.5 metric tons of maize and also reduce the quantum of support to the farmers in the northern part, which has the most rains, then we're going to have a disaster. The response that we got on the floor of the House was that Honorable Mutolo was bouncing in his usual style, as he says, we will never, ever, ever stop exporting maize. That is when the disaster happened. At that point, as your members on the left, we knew that we were headed for doom. When Honorable Mutolo said we will never stop. Again, if you followed the events on the floor of the House, our colleague MPs from the right, as they presented or tendered their discourse on the floor of the House, they continuously and consistently gave an impression that the PF government had marginalized the southern part of the country insofar as the distribution of farming inputs was concerned. We made several efforts on the floor of the House to try and educate our friend in government, knowing very well that they were new, to say the introduction of the e-voucher was to take care of a situation because we had we got weather forecasts, we had gotten warnings about climatic changes in the future, and knew to say we're going to experience these droughts. I'll tell you now that I was just reading a research paper that was done by Honorable Kasando in 2008, where he talked about these droughts in Southern Province. And we are talking about these droughts 16 years later. So there's nothing new about the drought that we're experiencing in the southern part of the country. As a matter of fact, the Minister of Environment came on the floor of the House to warn us about this El Nino and predicted that we will have challenges, especially in the southern part of the country. What did we see? Honorable Mutolo increased, he more than doubled the allocation of farming inputs to the southern part, where there would be no rain, and reduced the inputs, the allocation to the inputs that are going to the northern part. One of our members, and specifically Honorable Anton Kasandwe, rose on the floor of the House and asked to say, Honorable Minister, this increase in allocation, what informed your decision? And with the usual arrogance, they informed the House that they knew what they were doing. When other members wanted to pursue further, as usual, presiding officers could not allow them, stating that the minister is always right, and the Minister Mutolo was right, in his submissions. The question that we asked, was the Minister of Agriculture indeed right? Was he correct when he modified, the allocations, increased allocations to the southern part of the country and reduced the northern part? Ladies and gentlemen, the point I'm trying to drive home is as follows. Had we not exported the 1.5 metric tons of maize to Congo, and had we not changed the allocations of farming inputs, even with this drought, Zambia was going to be food secure. I'll repeat that. Had we not exported the 1.5 metric tons of maize to Congo, 1.5 million tons of, to Congo, and had we not changed the food packs, FISI packs rather, to northern province and southern province, if we had left them as they had found them, even with the current drought, Zambia would have been food secure. We would have been talking about challenges in the energy sector, but would have been food secure. So I want us to be very clear so that going forward, even as we have interventions, resolve certain challenges that will be as a result of this drought, we must first of all accept our Republican President Hakainde Hichilema, must take responsibility and accept that they were in total error when they decided to export maize to Congo. President Hakainde Hichilema must take responsibility that when they decided to reduce the quantum of support to the farmers in the northern part, it was indeed a mistake. So that is the reason why the challenges that will come as a result of this drought will seem to have been elevated because of the mistakes that were initially made. However, we are also not surprised when the president made the remarks that he made, referred to by Honorable Chisanga and Honorable Kampiongo. President Hakainde Hichilema still believes that we are not capable of farming in the northern part. And this is the reason why, as they tabled this matter in cabinet, it was decided to say the quantum of support in terms of FISIP should be reduced in the northern part. Because as far as he was concerned, there is no meaningful agriculture that is going on in the northern part of the country. I want to state this, that the people of Northern Province have not taken this very well. Because as Honorable Chisanga said, he's a Republican president. And according to Article 91 3D, he's supposed to have regard to other regions under his governance. To give an impression that the people of Northern Province or the northern part of the country cannot practice any meaningful agriculture is an insult, to say the least. And we would want the president to refrain from making such statements. We want the president to focus on uniting the country. That's what we expect from him. Countrymen and women, If you go to Northern Province now, you'll find that Mount Meru is harvesting a lot of sunflower from Northern Province for export. You'll find that Mount Meru is buying a lot of soybeans from Northern Province for export. You know that Zambian breweries has been buying a lot of cassava from Northern Province for their brewery operations. There's a lot of maize that in the earlier years was exported to as far as Kenya from Northern Province. You go to Northern Province now, you find that we are opening up new farms for coffee as far as Mbala, Mungu, Kasama, and everywhere else. These are commercial farms. You realize that there are truckloads of beans coming out of Northern Province every year. If you go to Northern Province now, you find that we have a lot of milling plants for rice because there's a lot of rice in the northern part of the country. How then was it that the president felt with all this that there is no meaningful agriculture that can happen? And they'll come and teach us agriculture. We have lived as farmers, small-scale farmers. I grew up as a son of a small-scale farmer, and we've continued on that trajectory. My family is still in farming. We've been able to do the little we've done out of farming. So I think going forward, as earlier guided, the president should restrain himself from making statements such as those, that would lead to divisions within the country. We encourage the president to continue making efforts to try and unite this country going forward. I also wish to state that going forward, Honorable Mutolo must come back on the floor of the House and reverse his statements, because his statement still stands that they will never, ever, ever stop exporting maize. We want to call the Minister of Agriculture to come back on the floor and assure the nation that they've learned their lessons. He will no longer embark on a program to export maize in order to pay debt. As Honorable Kafuaya pointed out, that is illegal because ways and means are approved on the floor of the House. None of us remembers approving that particular method of paying farmers, going to export maize in order to pay farmers. Honorable Mutolo must be reminded that the Appropriation Act is a law. We are in Parliament to approve the budget, which is actually governed by that particular law. So it's not up to him as a minister to wake up one morning and decide to load trucks and take them to Congo and come and convince us that the proceeds from those exports were meant to pay farmers. I want to take this opportunity to call upon law enforcement agencies to take up an investigation. What is clear is that Honorable Mutolo did not tell the truth. That money was not used to pay farmers. Had that been the case, we would have seen it in the supplementary budget. There would have been an application on the floor of the House on how to spend that money. So the fact that Honorable Mutolo Pili went that far, he has raised some alarm. We know that that money has not been properly accounted for. We are calling upon law enforcement agencies to take up this matter seriously and investigate. Find out where the proceeds from the export of maize have been taken. We are very suspicious that that money may have been misapplied. That money may not have been used properly. Hence the excuse given by Honorable Mutolo to say that money was actually used to pay farmers. So law enforcement agencies, please take up this particular task. We were not able to get any assistance from Auditor General's office, given the challenges that my honorable colleague earlier pointed out. With the compromised Auditor General's office, most of this information will not be able to get. But as far as we are concerned, that those are public funds. The money that was used to realized as a result of exporting maize to Congo should be properly followed and investigated so that Zambians can then know how that money was indeed utilized. And I also want to say this, that within the farming, within the northern province or northern part of the country, we've got the biggest farming block. This is the Kalungushi farming block. It's the biggest farming block in the country, countrymen and women. The average farming block in the country is about 100,000 hectares. In Kasama, in Lunte, as a matter of fact, Lunte, Mporokoso, and Luwingu, we locate Kalungushi farming block, which is 200,000 hectares. We want to call upon this government that going forward, and knowing that this is not the last drought that we have, we ask them to move and proceed with speed to try and mechanize these farming blocks, not only in northern province. We have farming blocks in Muchinga, we have farming blocks in Luapula. So there must be a deliberate policy to try and mechanize these farming blocks to increase production and be able to mitigate any adverse effects that we may have, in case of future droughts. I would also want to talk about what Honorable Kafoya talked about. I think the realignment of the budget is very, very important. And I think one important aspect that we pick from there is that the UPND government is out there headhunting councillors who should be given jobs so that they can create by-elections, especially in their non-strongholds, so that they can have some inroad in the other parts of the country. We want to say this, that President Hakainde Hichilema, time for politicking is gone. Can you put a stop, to this process of inducing councillors to resign, so that we have these induced by-elections, which are very costly. They are very costly on a number of fronts. We know now that we are faced with an energy crisis, where we would have expected the Minister of Energy to sit and strategize, come up with strategic plans on how we are going to navigate through this very difficult period. We would have expected him to be going to identify sources where we're going to get power to be able to supply to Zambia, given that our own generation for domestic use will go down by about 430 metric tons. But our Minister of Energy is busy campaigning in what? By-elections. The past 1 month, the Minister of Energy has not been in office. He was in Mwansabombwe 10 days. He was in Impika. He was in Chinsali. Those are misplaced priorities. Minister of Energy, my dear brother, Peter Kapala, please come back home. Come back to Lusaka immediately and begin to plan on how you are going to mitigate this impending crisis in the energy sector. And lastly, I want to just agree with my colleagues that spoke earlier that there is need to revitalize the private sector. We are in a crisis. We have to come out of this crisis. Like what happened after COVID, the post-COVID, there was a stimulus package to various sectors to try and just get them and reboot them into business. In this particular case, in the recent past, the Bank of Zambia has announced several measures, fiscal policies and monetary policies that are making it difficult for the private sector. So if we are going to help government come out of this crisis that will come as a result of a drought, we want to call upon the Bank of Zambia, we want to call upon the Ministry of Finance, to reduce on its domestic borrowing so that does not crowd out the liquidity for the private sector. A government needs help from the private sector to be able to grow or increase output in the agricultural sector. There is need to invite the private sector so that they come on board to try and assist government. But government must also do something to assist the private sector. So we want to call upon the Ministry of Finance to consider reducing borrowing from the domestic markets so that there's enough liquidity left for the private sector to borrow. So countrymen and women, Those would be my few remarks that we thought we could project to the people of Zambia on this Friday afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader of the Opposition. I think when we look at the summary that the Leader of the Opposition did say, that's why in Parliament, because pare means talk in French. If I try to won set a report, case him to show to no number to Africa, Pano, out to Sanga Badete. But teaching so to Alicoland, and there is gathering in the Parliament. And I think Parliament, if you read Article 61, 60, and you don't say Sharapana and Resangati, it's the house for the people. And Parliament drives power from the people. Parliament is a creature of the people. So the Leader of the Opposition emphasized that on that one, I think we are missing it. Then coming to the issue of planning agriculture and executing as such, Bachelanda Leader of the Opposition about how the inputs were distributed. But I think we were Zambia to because the same mouth of Mutoro said that the 2021-2022 food, much of the maize came from northern province. The same mouth of Mutoro said combined, even when they combine all the efforts, they cannot beat even what has been damaged by the drought. And when we look at the distribution of inputs, you need to know that northern province actually got 42% of what southern province got. And I think what we are calling for is that we had already known such discrepancies are there, and I think when we look at these things, where they made a big mistake, according to the Leader of the Opposition, is that first they came with the message that Kuriaka Patulula, Ukubali Valekeresh, Valeva Pela voucher. Filabalanda Tumunshebwa, I don't know Ujen Cook. Wakom Keresha Vasaksa drop voucher, Vamboxta mess up, FISIP. What has happened? But only of the opposition, don't time emphasize point. But that. This problem that we solve that twala ma inputs ya ING kwisa ukule okemfula. Ngatusheka na problem ya energy. Ngetroro sharp. If ya kuja ngana tukwata. Atumfila plan ya shire. But we also shocked by mtolo di dabashire bakoni ngati. Mali twala ma inputs ya ngati twakonkele PF plan effort to have side. But Leader of the Opposition navala that rice ifuma kumongo tuliye charo chonse. Amatara ifuma kumongo tuliye charo chonse. Cassava ifuma ku northern province tuliye charo chonse. Now Chirapo, the northern region has got zones like farm big blocks like Kalungushi. Then yalikwatana ile ama Israelites vatampire yo beta Green 2000, which is one of the biggest farms. Former president, but my friends in Central Province, my friends in Mkushi, but president being technocrats. Whatever chinga about president information of because my press conference career, tamani sana information. But president usheba alishwa chikwali wako na sandbit. Kula kuntende yako wambo na shani, each that produce 70 hectares of cassava. Ba president cassava ila bomba kuli covid ifira tusamba kunywa fira ba president ila mulanda tesa ifuma kuli cassava ba president cassava ila kita produce starch ya kusamsha copper. So ngama tumumo le sonse fira fidisha apart from ngunga fira bomba kuna kuli fira. Then ba Leader of the Opposition na wala ndati turafo kwishiba kwa ile ma proceeds ya Congo aba badile pop ya kwa president ba Leader of the Opposition ba panga jiru lolo babwela basonkola mutolo mbafuati kashitisha mata. So trafo kwishiba kwali ba proceeds of crime na fa trafo kwishiba proceeds of Congo ko yayi before trade that proceeds of Congo because proceeds of Congo na itushamunzala. So I think in summary the Leader of the Opposition batilanda ti if it was if you absara fuma kuno then katushinga fira monekela ngata fumonekela kula fuma male kwa fuma beans kwa fuma mbala la kukanda ta konse kula the whole region ile yonse akuya kulia nga matumulea kwa mkukire konse kula nikane kule fuma watata bakampyongo kula wolu balalo lwine. So where does that go? You go to Soweto and find out. If you think tafya shu pokufwa ilikishayo. Kabia Sokone, which is a more of a national market. Go to Soweto. They will ask you where they're getting these things. Whether they will mention any of those areas that the president talked about. So, that's what the opposition because corn stock and other produce. Because the rice from Makumongu Tavalemba Pati, Yala Diwa Fina, Navabe Mbabe Kanshan. In any case, my president belongs to 72 tribes by nature of taking that position. And he is a farmer of all the crops that are grown in this country. So he should not just boast about my fellow farmers and growing the crops, the monocrops that he was boasting about. He should also be a farmer of millet. He should be a farmer of maize. He should be a farmer of groundnuts and all the crops because he manages the country. That's the message that we are sending to the president. That let him be, when he's boasting about farming, let him not just have maybe livestock in mind. Let him not just have maize in mind. He should also have a multi-crop arrangement in mind. Then he's going to rule us properly because he has been given a mandate. And I think he holds executive power according to Article 90, 91, up to 98. He is the president. And I think we look up to him to provide leadership, not only in farming, but in other sectors. I think balanda apichika na pansa kamusumba wabwadi kabiri filanda tumpa mapamo watulile ngoma twakula pama kufetira bushifu until we ahead because ili ngiri netule monati nga twaipusheshi watu turande something it's always silenced. I hope that your president and additionally social media social media shad no one expects addict vala pita ku social media bamone ko kutira to alanda ko not provide sana ma solutions muri press briefing I ngata actualize if you valera ndako mai. So we ask the president that he should take this call that we have provided very seriously, and I think there are solutions that came from my brother there which can benefit from Sokotwani, which came from Bawip, which came from all the speakers that spoke, including the 9. Makamaka, Babonfu Kosana SG, IG, Bafko Kesan. So, if you watch that Tula Pano, new alternative votes. So, Chirikuli Bena, Ukusalamo, Fevala Manot Fiava Wombela, and I think the Shumfina family negative way, we were alarmed by what he said. And we were also shocked because we needed to add a voice. So ngakuliko wa media abenje pshapari kanokashita. We are all welcome wa media. If I may now use the English. No mshwana libako frequent muchive mbafe because though English is my fourth language. Nechinyanja kuna randanga mwani nechiroz nde ingiradi mwani mwenechitoka. So when we look at this, I think we are now inviting the media. If you did not get any clarity from what our leaders said here, you are free to answer to ask the question, and I think we have got a very able panel to deal with the questions. Any questions? Yeah. Going. Okay. It seems that the media do not have.